A global survey showed that 13% of the world's population want to emigrate from their countries of origin for the United States of America as their destination to live. What these people admire the most about this country is its civil liberties. Although anti-American opinions are evident in other latitudes, the promise of freedom is the most attractive for more than 150 million human beings who want to live within these borders. In the last 10 years, this nation has been an example of tolerance and amplitude in the recognition of rights that even surprise those who have been living here during this time. The lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community is alive in the United States, a historical moment of emancipation that all minority groups dream of. Nonetheless, this fight is less than over or close to being resolved. The last presidential election celebrated in this country forecasts a radical change in direction that compromises the latest achievements made by the LGBT community. We have arrived at the last moral frontier in the middle of this battle: sexual liberties versus religious liberties. For some, this is the beginning of the end. For others, this is the end of injustice. This is another chapter in the human experience. This is the LGBT experience. This is the moral geography of this planet. Red represents countries where homosexuality is illegal and punishable with fines, jail, or the death penalty. Yellow represents countries where the union between couples of the same sex is not recognized. And blue represents countries where the LGBT community has achieved a certain level of acceptance. This is one of the biggest demonstrations ever made against same-sex marriage in North and South America. It happened in 2015 in Venezuela, one of the countries of this region with the least amount of rights given to the gay community. It was in direct response from the abundant Christian and evangelical communities to the question of same-sex marriage discussed at the National Assembly. In Venezuela, 89% of the population affiliates as Christian or Catholic, and only 33% of that population approves the legalization of same-sex marriage. The Renacer Church is one of the headquarters of the Family is Life Foundation. This church is made up of more than 28 Venezuelan Christian churches.
Familia es vida, que es un movimiento que nace para defender la familia de todo ataque, no solamente que tiene que ver con la parte del homosexualismo en matrimonio entre ellos. Esa palabra matrimonio igualitario creo que está mal empleado, en primer lugar, porque la palabra matrimonio es originalmente está enfocado entre un hombre y una mujer.
Está comprobado científicamente que nadie nace homosexual. ¿Ok? Mi caso, yo tengo un hijo que desde la edad de los 17 años, él mostró esa condición y dijo, mamá, soy homosexual. O sea, yo sé, a mí nadie me lo está contando, yo no lo viví por otro, yo sé lo que estoy hablando. Si fuera una enfermedad o si fuera que alguien nació con esa condición, no tuviéramos tantos casos, tantas personas que han sido restauradas a su condición. Pero cuando en verdad Cristo llegó a sus vidas y vino la transformación, hoy se pueden sentir que están completos. Es decir, que tenemos pruebas.
Este grupo de personas tratan de imponer su criterio, tratan de justificar su acción y su modelo de vida porque ellos no han tenido un encuentro real con el amor y con la vida como tal.
Esto es profético, hermano, porque el anticristo que se va a manifestar en el mundo va a ser un homosexual. Eso es bíblico.
Anthropologists and historians find the role of religions as first means of social control to be the origin of homophobia. At the time, extinction was an underlying menace, emphasizing the need for the growth of the species. and making heterosexuality an act of survival. Naturally and fertile sex was not a part of these plans. For the Greeks and Romans, being gay or bisexual was very common. They did not have a word to refer to the behavior until Christianity arrived. The most influential religion in human civilization condemned homosexuality in the Old Testament. But the most influential testimony against this sexual behavior came from St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas stated that anal sex, sodomy, was not in accordance with natural laws. He argued that nature had created sexuality with the purpose of reproduction, so using it towards any other end was against God's original plan. This idea decisively influenced the standpoint of the Christian Church and the Western kingdoms for centuries. Choir music is born at church. It's the human voice praising the Creator, the same God whose writings ask for the death of anyone who lays with a man as if it were a woman. These are the voices of the Gay Men's Washington Choir, one of the oldest and second largest diverse sex choir in the world, where the only requirement is singing, and being gay only increases the chances of being accepted.
The Gay Men's Chorus in Washington, D.C. has been around for 35 years. And what's so great about us is that we sing for equality, not just for gay men or gay people in general, but we sing for equality for everybody. Every person that faces discrimination, we have a song for them. We choose to connect with people on an emotional level through music first, and then bring them into sort of a welcoming environment and softly get our message of equality and love and tolerance across that way.
Women in Uniform is the first film dealing with a lesbian subject. This is Germany in 1931. Hitler hadn't risen to power yet, and the United States was opening the doors of the Empire State Building to the public. Female leading actors who were openly homosexual in the big screen and television were non-existent until the 90s. That is, until 1997, when comedian Ellen DeGeneres came out as a homosexual in her sitcom, Ellen.
So thanks for stopping by. This was a lot of fun. Okay.
For God's sake, Ellen, tell him you're gay.
Is that true? Oh, that? Well, it depends on how, what your definition of gay is, because, yes, I'm gay.
The origin of the word lesbian comes from Sappho, the poet, 590 years before Christ in Greece. Sappho prepared young women for marriage on the island of Lesbos, with whom she would have relations with according to her poems, making her the great love symbol among women. Lesbians have been segregated twice as much. During the Roman Empire, they were heavily persecuted. Although homosexuality between men was accepted, in women's case, indulgence in lesbian sex was punishable by death due to their reproductive nature. 2,600 years have passed since Lesbos Island, as we face Tammy Baldwin, an openly gay senator in the United States since 1999. She has been dubbed the most powerful lesbian in the planet.
If you believe you've never encountered a person who is gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, you can hold on to all sorts of myths and stereotypes and lies about what it means to be gay. who that community is, who's a part of it. You know people in your neighborhood, at work, people you love that you regard highly. It changes your concept of what it means to be gay. You put it perhaps in a different category in your mind, like the difference between being left-handed and right-handed. But we know that just by changing a law that says, for example, discrimination is wrong, hate crimes are wrong and illegal, does not necessarily change the hearts and the minds of all of our citizens. We may still have a significant percentage of Americans who harbor hatred or harbor misinformation, mistrust, whatever it is. That will take time to change. But I do have faith that it will change, as it has with regard to views on race, views on minority religion, etc. It's a slow process, but with the laws, ultimately, usually comes, people do change their minds and their hearts.
My freedom will be taken away. I'm a California doctor who must choose between my faith and my job.
I'm part of a New Jersey church group punished by the government because we can't support same-sex marriage.
I will have no choice.
These commercials were produced by the National Organization for Marriage and were aired on American television to instigate opposition for same-sex marriage from its viewers.
We work to
its president, Brian Brown, is considered in the LGBT community as one of the leaders of the so-called homophobic far right in the United States.
They believe marriage is the union of a man and a woman.
All of the elites said this could never be done. One does not need to be of any particular faith to understand that marriage is by its very nature the union of one man and one woman. And only an out-of-control Supreme Court forced same-sex marriage on state after state. It wasn't the people of this country, and I think it's important for folks around the world to understand that Americans did not vote for same-sex marriage. We hear people, proponents of gay marriage, time and time again say, the battle's over, Americans have embraced that, they've embraced same-sex marriage. Where they're getting their data, because there was never a vote. And there's only, I think, 14 or 15 now around the world that have had this understanding, whereas there's 215 countries in the United Nations. So the notion of the triumphalism coming from the Human Rights Campaign or even our president himself, that somehow this is sweeping the globe, that's absolutely wrong. Understand this, just because the Supreme Court has done this, it doesn't mean marriage has changed in this country. Marriage is still the union of a man and a woman. We just have a lie in the law. And many of us will never accept this lie. There's nothing you can do to us to make us believe that it's true. We will never accept this.
These are profiles of the enemies of the LGBT communities in North America, including Brian Brown. Made by the human rights organization's campaign to expose and submit to the public, to scorn people who actively oppose same-sex marriage.
We cannot redefine or have the hubris to think we can redefine marriage without consequences.
They have been accused of demonizing and labeling those who oppose equal marriage as intolerant fanatics. They have also been accused of engaging in destructive activism in order to disseminate hate and fear to those who disagree with LGBT groups. As shown, this is part of the cultural and religious battle currently happening in the United States. Jeremy Pittman is the field director of this organization. He is considered one of the architects of this unprecedented political campaign, putting the LGBT communities in a winning position in less than 10 years against all odds.
Well, I work for the Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest advocacy organization working for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender equality in the United States. We are a membership organization with about 1.5 million members and supporters nationwide, and we mobilize those members to take action to help us pass pro-equality laws at the local, state, and federal level, defeat anti-equality efforts, and elect pro-equality candidates to public office. President Obama is a strong supporter of equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, and has directed his government, the executive agencies under his control, to make significant improvements in policies related to LGBT people. But at the end of the day, what we need is stronger federal laws, and those can only be enacted by our Congress. And so we continue to press for the U.S. Congress to take action to really provide durable legal protections for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. There was not one single place in the United States where a gay couple or a lesbian couple could be recognized by their government. There were no same-sex marriages, there were no civil unions, nothing, just 12 years ago. And now we have marriage equality in all 50 U.S. states. So we've made tremendous progress in a really short period of time. But this is not something that happened overnight. Countless everyday Americans who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender people have taken small, courageous steps that together have built a movement for equality that has made great strides. We still have a lot of work to do. I'm convinced that we are going to win the battles ahead of us and that we will pass the laws that we need to really protect LGBT people from discrimination. But it's going to take a lot more work. It's going to take a lot of money and smart campaign tactics. But at the base, it takes more people coming out, living authentic lives, and being honest with themselves, their family, their friends, and their neighbors.
But I'm not afraid. The famous kiss between Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura in the sci-fi series Star Trek is considered to be the first kiss between a white man and a black woman seen on TV in the United States. The year was 1968, and despite the legalization of interracial marriage in the last state of the North American country just a year prior, this kiss sent American society into a 20-year moral and legal discussion. This country's history shows that the evolution of change regarding moral patterns, such as abortion, legalization of alcohol, and women's suffrage, takes decades to be resolved. This is Gene Robinson, the first openly gay archbishop in the history of Christianity. After being chosen for the position, the Episcopal Church's conservative wing decided to separate in a process known as the Anglican realignment.
So I was the first openly gay and partnered priest to be elected bishop in all of Christendom, historic Christendom, which is a lot to bear on these little shoulders. So one of the things that we're talking a lot about these days is religious liberty or religious freedom, which is actually code for permission to discriminate. And if you allow people to discriminate based on sexual orientation, then why not on the basis of race? Or why not on the basis of gender? Or why not on the basis of fill in the blank? All you have to say is, my religion says no. And then you have permission to discriminate against anyone you choose, which makes the whole society fall apart. And it's not just what we do. It's not just about having sex with someone. It's about who we are. And that's a very much more deep, more personal, and I would say unalterable part of our personalities. People are won over to the notion that this was not a choice for us. I mean, in my case, I prayed to God fervently to take this away. I didn't want to be this way. I wanted to be married with children and all of that. If prayer and being open to being changed worked, it would have worked with me. And it didn't work with me.
religions condemn homosexuality as a spiritual insanity with a cure found in church. However, scientists have not clearly defined what it means to be sexually diverse. Nonetheless, thanks to psychiatrist Robert Spitzer's arguments on the subject, the American Association of Psychology removed homosexuality from the list of mental illnesses in 1973. He is a scientific hero for the LGBT community.
But I think it's just not true. I should also say to the gay community that I apologize for any harm I have done to them because of the study and my initial interpretation.
However, Dr. Spitzer startled the world in 2001 when he retracted his arguments. Finally, in 2012, Dr. Spitzer acknowledged that he was completely wrong on his new conclusions. Dr. Spitzer died in December 2015. Danny Drom is the first homosexual commissioner in the city of New York. Prior to being elected in 2009, he was awarded Best Teacher of the State in various occasions. He is an avid activist for the LGBT cause. Among the controversial subjects he has supported since his appointment is the integration of gay history in city schools' kindergarten curriculums and the celebration of the National Coming Out Day.
I think that the real catalyst for change has been coming out. People coming out and letting others know who we are. Our invisibility as LGBT people is our biggest enemy because everybody knows gay people. They just don't know that they know gay people. And today, we say to those people who try to push us back, we're not going to go back into the closet. We've already got a taste for freedom, and we know what it's like. And we, as gay people, have been taught through society to hate ourselves so much that these politicians who speak out against the gay community and who are closeted themselves oftentimes hate themselves and have a lot of internalized homophobia. And we, as out gay people, must fight back against that. But also have an empathy for what those people have been put through. So I think the experiences that we as LGBT people have had in some ways reflect some of the experiences, not all of the experiences, of the African American community. And so I think that at the root cause of all of it is fear and ignorance. And where fear and ignorance exist, that creates discrimination.
Hey, honey, how are you?
Fine, I guess.
What's going on?
Well, Obama is trying to force gay marriage on this country. That's not the change I voted for. Marriage is between a man and a woman.
That's not the change I voted for either.
What can we do?
We can vote for someone with values.
This is one of Mitt Romney's presidential campaign ads. He lost the presidential election against Barack Obama in 2012 as the Republican candidate. The fact that Romney lost with 5% of the votes highly reflects American views on this subject matter.
You've played an important role in helping my administration.
Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. We have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
In November 2016, the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump was elected as the new president of the United States. Historically, Republicans have embodied the conservative sentiments of the nation, and this new leader has become the echoing sound of these voices.
I'm against gay marriage. I am not in favor of gay marriage. I'm for traditional marriage.
Now, the LGBT community will experience great opposition from the highest role in power, and Donald Trump's election will have significant impact on their past and future achievements.
You become president, you might try to appoint justices to overrule the decision on same-sex marriage?
I would strongly consider that, yes.
We are in Frank Russo's home, president of the New York City chapter of American Family Association.
I'm just very sad to see our country moving in the way it's going on abortion and same-sex marriage. Marriage, for thousands of years, has been an institution basically intended for one purpose, to protect children. When the family starts breaking down, and in many ways the American family has because of very high rates of divorce and because so many children are born without their parents being married, those children have a much more difficult time in continuing the human race in a productive, proper way. Homosexuality, in my opinion, is a disorder. It's not something genetically caused. The homosexuals argue that homosexuality has a genetic cause. There's never been any study that's been replicated that shows it's genetically caused. One of the biggest factors is being abused sexually as a child. If you're abused sexually as a child, you're much more likely than someone not abused. That's one of the big factors. An absent father is a factor contributing to a higher probability of a male turning homosexual with an absent father. Homosexuals are allowed to adopt children. I do not think it's advisable. Now that the Supreme Court has legalized gay marriage, I think you're going to see in 10 to 20 years, you won't see it, it'll take time to get the data, but as they adopt children, my guess is you're going to see higher rates of child sexual abuse. But you never judge the individual because you don't know what's going on in their mind. It's only God judges the individual. You have to love the individual, but you judge the actions. And the actions of sexual actions of homosexuals are, in my judgment, wrong.
The stormtroopers for Hitler, the homosexual stormtroopers for Hitler, were to exterminate and eliminate the opposition and beat them into silence. That's what homosexual activists want to do today, not physically, but through intimidation and legal action and harassment to do the same thing to Christians today.
Brian Fisher was the director of the American Family Association until February 2015, when he was removed for stating that the Holocaust during the Second World War was caused by homosexual Nazi soldiers. Still, he remains a radio announcer on one of the radio programs of this association.
That looks innocent enough, doesn't it? Lots of young people hitchhike. Seems like a good way to get from one place to another. But sometimes there are dangers involved that never meet the eye. So no matter where you meet a stranger, be careful if they are too friendly. One never knows when the homosexual is about.
This instructive video on how to act when a homosexual attacks, produced by a California police department in 1959, is a vivid representation of the conservative attitudes towards the gay community back then. On June 28, 1969, the pro-LGBT modern movement was born. That night, gays, lesbians, and transvestites stood up against NYPD violence. This is Tris Sequoia, an eyewitness of this sexually diverse battle who has been working for 45 years as a bartender in this nightclub, considered the Mecca of the LGBT movement.
This is the bar that in 1969 was raided by the police. We fought back, and it's where gay life was accepted, and it's a leading history of where gay life started all over the world. When you set a bar on fire with the police in it, which we did, we lit the garbage cans in the neighborhood and threw them through the open windows. We were having the time of our life. The cops were deathly afraid. They had 300-400 people out there ready to kill them. And normally when they raided a gay bar in the old days, we went to jail overnight. Some judge would say, "You're wasting my time, go home." Some judge would call us a pervert and fine us $20. And the boys would send a lawyer down named Enid the Hat Gurley. And she would pay the fine, and we'd go back to that bar the next night and have a party.
This morning, the Supreme Court recognized that the Constitution guarantees marriage equality. In doing so, they've reaffirmed that all Americans are entitled to the equal protection of the law. This ruling will strengthen all of our communities by offering to all loving same-sex couples the dignity of marriage across this great land.
And good morning. We have an NBC News special report. We have breaking news coming from the U.S. Supreme Court.
That's right, and it's a big one. This is the decision the court has before it whether or not to legalize gay marriage across this country. Pete, can you tell us what it says?
To the LGBT community of that time, achieving the legalization of same-sex marriage 4 decades after, on June 26, 2015, with a Supreme Court win of 5 votes against 4, was an inconceivable idea.
13 states illegal, but those 37 states had same-sex marriage legal in this country across every state in this nation.
Maybe you would like to personally express your thanks to the person who had the courage to cause a lot of people to start standing up. A person whose courage...
This was an unacceptable ruling for many conservatives, such as Kim Davis, a Kentucky county clerk who disobeyed the court's decision by refusing to approve same-sex marriage licenses.
Is going to wake up the politicians, the pastors, and the people. Would you please help me welcome to the stage Kim Davis.
Once dismissed for contempt, Ms. Davis was perceived as a moral hero, with Rocky's soundtrack in the background. One of the leaders of this LGBT battle is the Lambda Legal Organization, which has played a vital role in the legal achievements of sexually diverse groups.
Well, this year, 2015, in this country seems like and is a revolutionary year because, of course, we won this amazing and very important Supreme Court victory that allows same-sex couples to get married across the country. It's not the end of the story by any means, but it was a pretty exciting and transformative victory that we secured this year at the Supreme Court. And we still don't have a federal law in this country that prohibits discrimination in employment and all other aspects of public life on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. So we still have a big political fight to win in that regard. Well, the victory on marriage equality was decades in the making. I mean, the first cases that were unsuccessful cases were in the 1970s. The first real win in a state court for marriage equality in this country was in 2003, which is a case that Lambda Legal won at the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, which is called Lawrence v. Texas, which for the first time in 2003 banished all the remaining sodomy laws, the laws that made it a criminal act, and still in some states, to engage in consensual same-sex sexual activity. And that victory was very momentous for ending those laws and also for beginning the process of building legal precedents in Supreme Court rulings that took us to a series of other decisions, including the decision in 2013 to strike down what was then called the Defense of Marriage Act in our country, leading finally to this victory in 2015. So we finally got rid of our policy of discrimination against lesbian and gay bisexual people serving openly in the military, and that was an important breakthrough. You know, the military in this country is one of our biggest employers, and the discrimination against people was a terrible barrier. We still have discrimination in the military against people who are transgender, and so that's still a fight we have ahead of us.
Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a policy implemented by the U.S. Army that forced recruits to stay in the closet in order to serve in the U.S. Army. The gavel sealed the eradication of that rule in the U.S. Congress, which has been considered one of the biggest victories of the LGBT community in the country. Wilton Manors, also known as Gay Town, is the second city in the U.S. with the most homosexual residents, with a proportion of 140 for each 1,000 inhabitants. Naturally, the mayor and all the members of the Legislative Council are LGBT.
And Wilton Manors is proud to be the second most populous LGBT city in the nation per capita. We have a population of a little over 12,000 individuals, and about 30% of our city happens to be LGBT. We're very proud of our record on LGBT issues. We've been fighting for equality within our city. We've passed laws about non-discrimination in our employment. The vendors and people that contract with the city have to afford domestic partnerships, equal protections, and things of that nature, and cannot discriminate based on sexual orientation or gender identity. There are people that have used religious teachings to justify slavery, to justify the lower class of women throughout history. The Catholic Church didn't agree that the earth revolved around the sun and excommunicated Copernicus. So in love to the church, they have been wrong on occasion. And honestly, the approach to the LGBT community has certainly been needing revision and needs to be reformed, like many other things that they've experienced through their history.
Those opposed to cities like Wilton Manors argue that gay ghettos, municipalities, and spaces taken by sexually diverse groups achieve the opposite effect of what they strive for by excluding heterosexual norms and isolating gay lifestyles.
Now that the campaign is behind us, we have a lot to focus on: green sustainability, community engagement, pushing forward to open our library, amongst other issues. I want to say to everyone who voted for me.
We talked to Embar Cohen about this subject, who after being elected commissioner of the city of Aventura at only 26 years old, became the youngest lesbian to be elected for a public office position in the USA.
When people say that Wilton Manors is just a gay city, yes, there's a lot of gay people in Wilton Manors. There's also a lot of straight people in Wilton Manors because the gays are so fabulous. But besides that, you know, there's people like to go with like-minded people where they feel safe, right? Aventura is a city where there's a lot of Jewish people. There's places where there's a lot of Russian peoples right across the bridge. You go to places where it feels comfortable, where the food is what you grew up with, where the people are okay with who you are. And so Wilton Manors just happens to be one of the places, just like Aventura is a place where a lot of Jewish people like to live. So to call it a gay ghetto is just another label or mislabel that people are looking for to ostracize a group of people who are coming together. I think there's a lot of work to be done to educate people on the misconceptions, just as many people think, well, if you're Muslim, then you're a terrorist. If you're Jewish, then you're cheap. If you're from Venezuela, you don't have a voice. There's a lot of misconceptions. And I think that by allowing people to share their views and allowing people to become educated, that's the way that we're going to really quiet down the misconceptions and open a community where there is tolerance and acceptance.
I love this country. I love it for the principles it was founded upon, where every American is created equal, regardless of skin color or sexual orientation. People who love those of the same gender were created as every other American, equal. I want my children to grow up with the same opportunities as every child, living the American dream of liberty, freedom, and justice for all.
The creation and establishment of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, GLAAD, is one of the most noticeable achievements of this community. This nonprofit institution is responsible for monitoring American mass media and its handling of the LGBT subject.
What had happened was there was the AIDS crisis in New York City, and the reporting that was coming about around that was really negative about gay men. And so a group of people, about 4 people, got together and started a protest in front of the New York Post to start to change the way that they were talking about gay men. And then eventually we opened a Los Angeles chapter because we knew that the best way to move hearts and minds was to thread positive, accurate storylines in TV shows and in movies, and visibility is critical to that. And so our whole drive at GLAAD has been about visibility and using media for that visibility. So there was a breakout watershed moment in the 1980s when the TV show called Will and Grace came onto screen. that we had pushed really hard here at GLAAD for inclusive storylines that had LGBT people. We recently had a big watershed moment for the trans community when we had Caitlyn Jenner come out with Diane Sawyer. So those moments have really propelled culture forward, because for so many people who never even knew somebody who was gay, or for that young man or woman living, in a town that doesn't have a lot of culture, they'd never know anybody else who might be like them. And this brings somebody into their living room, into their home. It's about raising up everyday people's stories who are LGBT. And we know that bridges the gap. We know it changes hearts and minds.
Are you a woman?
Yes, for all intents and purposes, I am a woman. People look at me differently. They see you as this macho male, but my heart and my soul and everything that I do in life, it is part of me. That female side is part of me. That's who I am.
Transgender people are those who don't identify with their sex at birth. This group is the least understood in the LGBT community.
Because why?
Caitlyn Jenner's case, formerly known as Bruce Jenner, 1976 Olympic athlete and a celebrity stepfather of the Kardashians, allowed the American public to take the LGBT conversation to the mass media.
If someone asked me why I used to be a boy and now I'm a girl, I would say that I have a girl brain and boy body, and I think like a girl.
Jazz is the youngest transgender girl with gender dysphoria to be documented entirely. Her parents allowed her to identify as a girl from a young age, though her body was biologically male. Her case paved the road to a bigger debate on the need to open the world of sexuality to kids, a subject that was not spoken of or was hidden until they became of age.
I am a teenage girl. I'm also
Jazz's case, having exposed her life on mass media, such as the YouTube channel I Am Jazz, is an example of the internet's vital role in the battle for acceptance of the transgender community.
Really just make me Jazz. So I am Jazz.
Jazz was invited to be a master of ceremony at the Southern Comfort Conference, the biggest transgender meeting in the world.
Ever noticed turtles don't have schedules? Been okay with a bad hair day?
In this exercise of inclusiveness and tolerance, the city of Fort Lauderdale has discovered a gold mine by focusing on gay and transgender tourism.
Time for a new spin.
This is the first commercial campaign addressed to the LGBT public at the national level.
Get to know Greater Fort Lauderdale at sunny.org.
Richard Gray, head of communications at the Fort Lauderdale Bureau of Tourism, explains how they handled this messaging with little experience.
My job is to grow LGBTQ tourism to Broward County, and I'm privileged to have that job. We launched our initiative 19 years ago. Believe it or not, and I find it hard when I say it, but we did not use the word gay then because it was too risky to use the word gay, so we said rainbow. And then very, very quickly, I would say within 5 years' time, we found gold at the end of the rainbow. There was gold, and we saw that gold, and we became more and more confident. We have become pioneers in this platform. Conservatively, last year, we believe that 1.5 million LGBT tourists came here to this wonderful destination, and they spent $1.5 billion. It's a lot of money. I think the key, if you like, of our success or how we have become accepted is our allies. I think, we've had a lot of incredible leaders that have waved the gay flag and fought for rights. But I think now corporate America, mainstream America, has taken the fight over for us. And I think at the end of the day, it just makes good business sense to market to everybody and accept everybody for who they are.
This is the sunny side of the story. Because the reality and statistics of what is happening in the LGBT and above all with the transgender community is somber. 20% of gays, lesbians, or bisexuals in the US have tried to commit suicide. And in this universe, 41% of transgenders have attempted to end their lives. Araya Lester, director of a transgender work group in the state of Florida, talks to us about this. She is also the founder of the organization Trans Miami, the main helpline for people who experience gender identity and anatomical sex issues.
When it comes to gender identity, that's a whole different thing. So when someone has a gender identity that's non-conforming to the traditional male and female type of constructs that most of society has, then that's when the T comes in. And T is transgender, and the definition of transgender is of or relating to someone whose identity or gender expression is different than the sex that they were given at birth. Transgender people have very high suicide rates and very high rates of attempts of suicide as well. And then when you have a lot of prejudice and when you have a lot of ostracism and hate and stigma from society in general, then all of that kind of overlays against each other to bring those high rates of suicide for the transgender population up. Transitioning and being trans is all about accepting who you are internally, no matter what external features you may have. And that's the whole aspect of transitioning, and the whole aspect of someone being transgender. Was even a time in my lifetime where I felt that, there was no way that anyone, much less the general public, is going to be accepting of who I truly felt that I was on the inside. And, now I find myself, even though I still go through struggles, I am celebrated and I have a good support system. And it all comes from my confidence and me loving myself first.
I'm here to admit that I am, in fact, HIV positive. And I have to put a stop to this onslaught.
When Charlie Sheen offered in an interview in 2015 to admit that he was carrying the HIV virus, he motivated more than 4 million people to search for ways to prevent the virus worldwide, increased the number of blood tests to detect the virus by 14%, and spurred condom sales in the U.S. This is known as the Sheen effect today.
Scientists at the National Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta today released the results of a study which shows that the lifestyle of some male homosexuals has triggered an epidemic of a rare form of cancer.
The first AIDS reports described it as a disease related to the gay community. In fact, it was known as gay cancer until it was correctly classified with the acronym HIV.
Researchers know of 413 people who have
This piece is an important piece of artwork, and it's called the 10-year ribbon. And it's the first piece of artwork we had here installed in the museum. So the artist on this saved all of his HIV medicine bottles for 10 full years. So it comes out to 417 bottles of medication.
It is well known that the HIV virus affects everyone equally. However, the sexual holocaust caused by the AIDS pandemic in the 80s made sexually diverse groups visible to a skeptic world. Yet, here in Fort Lauderdale, we came upon the first and only AIDS museum.
Since the beginning of 1981, when it first kind of broke publicly to the world, since that time, over 75 million people have been infected with HIV. Since then, about 39 million people have died. Some people are aware of other tragedies in our life, and one example is the German Holocaust. In the German Holocaust, there's maybe 7 to 8 million people that have passed away, and about 400 museums telling that particular story and telling it very well. But since 1981, 39 million people have died, and this is the one and only museum in the world telling that story and the experience of what we've all lived through over the past 35 years. In some cases, people think that it doesn't exist anymore, that people aren't dying of it. But still, people are dying of it, and people still are infected with HIV. I mean, right here in Broward County, 1 out of every 5 person who is HIV is unaware of their status, simply just because they're not getting that test. And if they get that test, they're not going to infect someone else, who infects someone else, who infects someone else. It starts with the conversation. For me, it starts with that, talking about it. When it came out, people didn't want to accept it, didn't want to believe it. And in some cases, because it was happening at the very beginning to mostly homosexual men, they were considered to be expendable, and people just didn't care. Being HIV positive is not a death sentence. You can still do wonderful things. You can still be an active member of the community. You can still lead an active life. It definitely happened to us, the LGBT community, at first. And we said, we're not going to let this get us down. You know, I'm here. I'm here, and I don't know why. And many people passed away. And hopefully I can be a voice for those people.
Grandma, my teacher says if Grandpa was a girl, it's okay. You can still be married.
If we change the definition of marriage,
God creating Adam and Eve, that was so old-fashioned.
our kids will be taught a new way of thinking.
He should have created Anna and Eve. If my dad married a man, who would be my mom? I'm confused.
This is a campaign financed by the National Organization for Marriage against the legalization of gay couples' right to adopt a child. In March 2016, a U.S. federal judge overturned the law banning adoption from gay couples in the state of Mississippi, making it legal in all 50 states of the nation. It is a whole new legal concept on having a family, just like the one Christopher and Timothy Hay formed when they adopted a child.
In 2011, accepted a job as a director for an animal hospital in Charleston. And shortly after I had started, I had an employee who worked for me there. She came to me and told me that she had found out she was pregnant unexpectedly. She was not prepared to be a mother. She'd never had any desire or want to be a mother. And she thought, that we would be great parents. So she actually offered this unborn child to us, which was a huge offer. At the same time, a big dilemma, because up until that point, Timothy and I had never discussed having children. We went through marriage counseling, or relationship counseling, prior to Caleb ever being born, to see if our relationship could withhold, this addition to our family. We wanted to make sure that we could be the most supportive team possible to raise a child. And we're in it for the long haul. I mean, this is it. This is our family.
I wanted to move back to Florida. I lived here probably 20 years ago. Didn't care for it then. But as I moved back to Charleston from here, I realized, South Florida did more fit the lifestyle that I was actually looking for. Mm-hmm. So I realized it was the right thing to do. And it's a great place for Caleb to actually have two fathers, okay, and it'd be more acceptable for him. I think he'd be bullied a little bit more if we would have stayed where we stayed. We kind of made the decision, do we want to fight the fight, swim upstream, or kind of go with the flow and at least go where we're more accepted? We've got wonderful neighbors that help us. It's raising a child is more than just a one person or two person, and it really does take a village.
This unusual family goes to an even more unusual church called Sunshine Cathedral. This church belongs to the Metropolitan Community Churches, MCC, with more than 222 other congregations in 37 countries. The church is dedicated to the spiritual attention of the sexual minorities who are disregarded by other churches. Promoter of the queer theology as a way to understand and offer God and Christianity to the LGBT community throughout the world.
Yeah, I think what makes us unique is that, when people come to this place, at Sunshine Cathedral, they walk into a place that they know that they're welcome for who they are, who they were born to be, and that we meet them on their journey. It's part of the self-discovery. We don't tell them how you have to live. You don't have to obey this rule or that rule. We meet you where you are, and we walk the journey with you. We are unashamed to say that not everything is equal in Scripture. Some Scripture is abusive and should be challenged, and some Scripture is healing and should be embraced. And so when people are using Scripture to hurt people or exclude them, that's not for us the Word of God. When Scripture says God is love, and whoever lives in love lives in God, and God lives in them, that for us is the Word of God.
This is the Legal Center for Southern Poverty, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting civil rights. They are the reason the Ku Klux Klan and more than 6 other organizations from the far right that support white supremacy, homophobia, and anti-Semitism were almost extinct. Sam Wolf is one of the most notorious defense attorneys for LGBT community rights. In fact, his lawsuit against an organization that performed corrective therapy for homosexuals made such procedures illegal in various U.S. states.
Well, we brought the first lawsuit of its kind in New Jersey that went to trial just this last summer. And we represented 4 men, 3 from Orthodox Jewish backgrounds and 1 from a Mormon background. And they all went to a program that said, look, pay us money, you'll do this therapy in groups, individual session, you'll go to these weekends in the woods, and we're gonna help you change to heterosexual. They actually said that they had a success rate of 2/3 people that went through, they had some significant success in changing their sexual orientation. 1/3 actually completely changed from homosexual to heterosexual. And so they made all these representations. They said, look, this is scientifically based. Our program's successful. The whole reason why you're gay is because being gay is a kind of disorder. And these were all misrepresentations. So we took them to court. We brought in experts, the best experts in the country. We examined their evidence and their experts, and when push came to shove, they weren't able to show that what they had said is accurate. And in fact, we brought evidence to show that it's not accurate and that it's a kind of consumer fraud, because this is under a state law claim in New Jersey, but in New Jersey, like other places, you can't just say whatever you want about your product if it's not true. And so you have to be accurate, and they weren't accurate. They were saying things that aren't true. When we filed the case on behalf of Paul Hard, that was the first marriage case in Alabama, and they did a poll on TV asking, will there ever be same-sex marriage in Alabama? And I think at that time when we filed the lawsuit a long time ago, most of the people were saying, no, it's never going to happen in Alabama. We're never going to have same-sex marriage. But here we are not that long after that, when it's the law of the land throughout the United States. And so it's a big progress, but I think I was anticipating it just because the law is on our side. The ideas of equality and basic fairness and justice really compel equality and fair treatment for all people. And so the marriage decision really made sense. And so there's all these sorts of issues that still remain to work on and to really get to that place where LGBT people can be free to be who they are, and not face continued discrimination in a variety of different ways that continues. I think it's getting better, but there's definitely work to be done in the South and elsewhere.
Opening statements started today in the lawsuit over the 10 Commandments monument on display on the Bloomfield City Hall lawn. The ACLU filed a federal lawsuit more than 2 years ago on behalf of 2...
In 1980, the Supreme Court of the United States denied the practice of law demanding all state schools in Kentucky to place a copy of the 10 Commandments in each of their classrooms. This case has come up in different versions in various courts around the country, and they have all been resolved with the Supreme Court applying the First Amendment of the Constitution. Despite this law and the decision allowing same-sex marriage nationwide, these cases have re-sparked the debate about the violation of religious rights.
I will not support any bill
that diminishes the religious freedom of Hoosiers or interferes with the constitutional rights of our citizens to live out their beliefs in worship, service, or work.
Mike Pence, elected Vice President of the United States, has built his political reputation around the argument that the legalization of abortion and same-sex marriage violate the religious rights of a nation with deep Christian roots. Colonel John Eidsmoor is a veteran advisor of the Foundation for Moral Law, a team of constitutional lawyers fighting for the reinstatement of religion in the law.
The Foundation for Moral Law was established around 2004, and it was established for the purpose of defending the United States Constitution as its framers intended it, and particularly to defend the issues of religious liberty, and also particularly the right to acknowledge God in the public arena. We believe that the nation was established as a godly nation. Our Declaration of Independence says that we are entitled to our independence by the laws of nature and of nature's God, and goes on to say that we are all created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights endowed by the Creator. And unless we recognize there is a higher law which guarantees human rights, there's no real basis for believing in human rights. If rights come from the government can take them away. So they're not really rights, they're privileges. So defending the Constitution as written, and particularly in these areas of religious liberty, has been the Foundation's major mission. Basically, the problem as we see it is that the marriage was intended by God. It was an institution established by God to be between one man and one woman. And I question the authority of a court or even any civil government to alter the definition of this institution. And the words of the Constitution, well, Thomas Jefferson once warned that in the hands of judges like this, the Constitution would be a ball of wax that could be shaped any way any judge wants to shape it. It becomes meaningless then. One of the questions that's going to come up is, are judges that may have moral and religious objections to same-sex marriage, will they be required to perform same-sex marriages? How about chaplains in the military? Will they be forced to do so? And what about churches that won't allow same-sex marriage? Will they either be forced to do so, or will they lose their tax-exempt status for refusing to do so? So right now, I wouldn't say that my rights are being violated, but I think that it could move in that direction. So it's a danger.
Harvey Milk is the first openly homosexual politician in the U.S. He was murdered by an ex-city chancellor who was blatantly opposed to the sexual diverse community. His legacy still lives with his nephew, Stuart Milk, who is the co-founder of the foundation that bears his uncle's name.
We believe that equality and justice is not achieved for LGBT people or for any people until we have justice and equality for everyone everywhere. So now you can get married anywhere in the country, but more than half of the country, if you were to get married on a Saturday or a Sunday and go into work on Monday and put your same-sex partner's picture on your desk, you can legally be fired, including here in Florida. So Florida, you can get married and you can get fired for having married a same-sex partner. So we've got to go back and backfill. And it's not so easy because the Republicans have no intentions of passing a national law that will prevent people from being discriminated against because they're lesbian and gay. So we still have work to do. And when you're a minority group, you're always at risk. It does not end. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of our country, was asked, when does the price of justice and when does the battle for justice and equality end? And he says it never ends. It requires vigilance constantly whenever you have minority groups. And so that's really one of the lessons that I think we in the U.S. can teach around the world. I go to places like Italy and Greece and these cultures that Egypt that are so old. And the only thing that I've ever seen held up that we have in the U.S., even in the Americas that is old, is the Constitution. It's the oldest living, working people's constitution in the world. And it's the briefest. And it's really one of the most solid. And so again, I go back to our founding father who said, the price of justice, the price of equality is vigilance. The battle, you cannot let down your guard. It requires constant tending and caring.
Humanity is going through a historic time clarifying moral, natural, and just legal subjects. Regardless of our position on this battle of ideas, the search for these answers is what makes us humans, and the reason for us to feel proud when facing these dilemmas. Pride is a word that refers to self-love or an excess of it. Some religions consider it a capital sin that transforms angels into demons. But for the LGBT community, it is a word that provides a basis to liberate themselves from social stigmas. And the question remains why? Why should someone feel proud of being gay?
The question is, why not be proud? You know, I think when you start finding love in yourself, when you start appreciating yourself and you're proud of yourself, you need to spread it to the world.
I think this whole notion of pride as being an antidote to shame is a very important part of our development.
Because we were so beaten down for so many years and we were hated by so many people that we needed to instill pride in ourselves as human beings and our right to exist.
You are not like the myths and stereotypes that society used to have. You should be proud to be who you are, who God made you.
The first part for me is about self-acceptance. If I can accept myself for the way I am, then let's work on the rest of society.
As a trans individual, you have to have pride of yourself because that's the only way that you can step forth out of your house.
At the base, it takes more people coming out, living authentic lives, and being honest with themselves, their family, their friends, and their neighbors.
Debemos ser orgullosas por tener el valor, tú sabes, la valentía de vivir en nuestra verdad.
We can all recognize our place in the rainbow diversity of life and feel good about who we are.
And there's really space on this earth for all of us.
So we are all people, and that's why I am proud to be gay.
I've reached a spot in my life where you can't make me ashamed of who I am and who I love. I will be proud of that. And so if pride is the word we have, it's the word we'll use.
No entiendo a qué vine a este mundo. No entiendo qué hago yo acá. Viviendo o sobreviviendo. Pero siempre buscando la verdad, verdad. Cristianismo, budismo o ateísmo. Yo no sé dónde puedo encajar. Sigo viendo desde lejos el camino y no sé cómo llegar. Cristianismo, budismo o ateísmo. Yo no sé dónde puedo encajar. Sigo viendo desde lejos el camino. Oh, yo te pido ya